My flatmate turned landlord kept threatening me to move out. So I finally did and didn't tell him. When I think back to my years at university, there are so many things I'd do differently if I had the chance to go through them again. I wouldn't waste time worrying about things that didn't matter. I'd study smarter, not harder. I'd probably even pick a different major. But one thing I wouldn't change, one of the most cathartic and satisfying experiences of my young adulthood, was the way I blindsided a toxic friend who thought he could lord his ownership of a flat over me. This story goes back to the early 2000s. To set the scene, it was 2001, I was 18 years old, fresh-faced, and heading off to university. Like most students, I was equal parts nervous and excited. I wanted to learn, sure, but more than anything, I wanted independence. That's the age when you can almost taste adulthood, and living in student halls was the first step toward proving I could make it on my own. That's where I met Donald. He was in the same hall of residence, and we struck up a friendship almost by accident. At first, it was the usual sort of hallmates by circumstance kind of thing. You talk because you live down the corridor. You drink together because you're both underage enough to find it hilarious. And you laugh about the same awful cafeteria meals. But over time, we clicked. We had a similar sense of humor, both loved music, and he seemed like the kind of guy you could trust. By the end of first year, we were good enough friends that when the question of housing came up, it was natural that we'd move into a flat together. Along with two other mates, we rented a 4-bedroom house. The place was nothing fancy, but it was ours. Those days were honestly some of the happiest of my early adult life. Messy kitchens, loud nights, hangovers that felt like death itself, and hours spent procrastinating when we should have been writing. The year passed quickly, and so did the lease. By then, things had started to shift. One of the housemates dropped out. Another moved back closer to home. Donald, who had also left university but landed a steady job at a bank, made a big announcement. He was buying a place. I remember being impressed. At 21, I could barely manage my overdraft, and here was Donald talking about mortgages. He asked if I wanted to rent his spare room. He framed it as a win-win. I'd get a stable place to live, and he'd get help with his mortgage. We were friends, after all, so why not? At first, it seemed like a good arrangement. The place was in a decent location, close to campus, and not far from my part-time job in retail. I figured living with Donald would be easier than sharing a place with strangers. We already knew each other's quirks, after all. But looking back, that's where the cracks began to form. The shift in our friendship. Donald changed once he became a homeowner. It wasn't obvious immediately, but over time, the small shifts added up. First, he became less social. The same guy who'd spent nights laughing at silly jokes and downing cheap drinks now barely wanted to leave the flat. When mutual friends came round, he acted cold and dismissive, making them feel unwelcome. He'd cut them down with snide remarks, then smirk and say, "Relax, it's a joke," whenever anyone called him out. The thing about humor is that it depends on trust. If you believe someone's on your side, you laugh at their teasing. But when that trust starts to erode, the same words sting. Donald's jokes were just insults in disguise, and everyone could feel it. People stopped coming over, nights out became rare. Suddenly, our friendship felt less like a partnership and more like an arrangement of convenience. Then came the rules. My house, my rules. It started small. A few months into the tenancy, Donald announced he was getting Sky TV installed. This was back when satellite and cable were still a luxury for students, and I genuinely couldn't afford it. I was juggling 3 full days at university and working 4 shifts at my shop job just to pay rent, food, and bills. When I told him I couldn't chip in, his response was smug and cutting. "Well, then you don't get a say in what I watch on my TV." It wasn't said as a simple statement of fact. It was delivered with that self-satisfied little smirk, the kind that makes your blood pressure rise. From then on, it escalated. Chores became another battleground. Donald got lazier, and anytime I pointed out that things weren't balanced, he twisted it into being my fault. "I work all day," he'd argue, "while you just go to university. You got loads of free time compared to me." Never mind that my free time was spent in lectures, in the library, or behind a till at the shop job. If there were dirty dishes in the sink, it was apparently my mess. If the bin hadn't been taken out, it was because I was neglectful. If the bathroom wasn't spotless, I was slacking. It became a pattern. He'd gaslight me into thinking I wasn't pulling my weight, then swoop in with the phrase that became his mantra, one that still rings in my ears to this day. My house, my rules. Maybe we should rethink you living here if you don't like it. He used that line like a weapon. Over and over again, anytime I pushed back, anytime I asserted myself, he'd remind me that technically I was just a guest in his domain. The place might have felt like a shared home, but in his eyes, it was his castle and I was just a peasant paying tribute. Reaching the breaking point. After months of this treatment, I started to withdraw. I spent most of my time holed up in my room, headphones on, reading or studying, just to avoid conflict. I'd tiptoe around the flat, polite but distant, because any spark of confrontation turned into another lecture about his rules. The friendship we once had was dead. I didn't even mourn it at that point. I just wanted out. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. A friend mentioned that someone they knew was looking for a flatmate. I went to meet them, saw the room, and felt relief wash over me. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, welcoming, and most importantly, free from Donald's oppressive energy. I said yes almost immediately. When I told my parents what I was planning, they didn't hesitate to help. They knew I'd been struggling. They could hear it in my voice on phone calls. They offered to drive up and help me pack. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to warn Donald. He'd spent months threatening me with, maybe you should move out. Well, fine. I'd take his advice. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of preparing for it. I wanted him to feel the shock, the same shock he caused me with his constant belittling and smugness. The move-out day. The Saturday morning of the move arrived. My parents pulled up in their car, and we started loading my belongings. Donald came into the living room, clearly not expecting visitors. The transformation in his demeanor was almost comical. He turned on the charm, acting like the friendly host in front of my mom and dad. "Oh, I didn't know you were coming to visit," he said brightly, smiling at them. That's when I gave him the line I'd been rehearsing in my head. "They're not here to visit. They're here to move me out. I've got a new flat. I decided I didn't want to live by your rules after all, so I found somewhere like you kept suggesting." The look on his face was priceless. His smile faltered. His eyes went wide. He just stared at me, frozen, like he was waiting for someone to shout, "Gotcha!" and reveal it was a joke. But no one laughed. He skulked off to his room, avoiding us while we finished packing. My parents and I loaded everything into the car in just 2 trips. The whole process took less than an hour. When everything was out, I placed my keys on the coffee table, gave the flat a last glance, and walked out without saying goodbye. The aftermath. That evening, settled into my new flat, I got a text from Donald. "I'm really sorry for the way I behaved. I hope we can still be friends." I stared at it, feeling all the months of frustration and resentment bubbling up. Then I typed the only response that felt right. Ha 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 ha. I hit send and never heard from him again. Later, a mutual friend filled me in on what happened. Apparently, Donald had burned so many bridges that no one else wanted to move in with him. Without a tenant, he couldn't afford the mortgage. Within months, he had to sell the flat, quit his job, and move back in with his mom. Meanwhile, my new flatmate became one of my best friends, a friendship that lasted for decades. We're still close to this day, over 20 years later. And that's why I don't regret how it ended. The most satisfying part wasn't just leaving. It was the look on his face when he realized I'd actually taken him at his word. He'd spent months saying, "Maybe you should move out." So I did, on my terms, without giving him the chance to stop me and without giving him the satisfaction of a proper goodbye. If you're out there reading this, Donald, you sucked, your rules sucked, and your overbearing aunt was as annoying as ever. But me, I got the last laugh.